Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk. Dr. Michael Rapici. It's Barry Falk, Dr. Barry Falk from Tallahassee, Florida,
Barry,
broadcasting tonight.
You're talking
Happy
to me.
To you.
It is me. Yes. And you're you.
You recognize me.
How are you?
I hailed you and you recognized me.
Indeed.
And you recognized yourself in my interpellation. We could probably stop this episode right here.
We're done.
Because, dear listeners, we're talking about Louis Althusser's 1970 essay, Ideology and Ideological State Apparatuses, Notes Toward an Investigation. And this is a kind of landmark definition and analysis of a key term in Marxist thinking. And now it's sort of past, it's inside Marxist thinking, but it's sort of past. I think most people in the academy and out have a working notion of something called ideology. And Althusser's essay is a kind of important moment in this interpretation, investigation of the concept. So that's what we're talking about this particular episode. And just a quick note that this episode, part 2 of this is our second episode on this essay by Marxist philosopher, 1970 essay by Marxist philosopher Louis Althusser. We originally conceived this discussion as somehow in dialogue with Simone Weil's 1943, I believe, essay toward the abolition of all political parties, or for the abolition, on the abolition. I think it's on the abolition of all political parties. And the reason why we did that, let me just, before we get right into the Althusserian text, one of the reasons I'm going to try to just see, and you can help me with this, Michael, just sort of recapitulate for ourselves and for listeners what we thought of was the initial connection between two essays. And I'll start off and you can help me out. In Simone Weil's essay, there is a very all-encompassing critique of, as she wrote in the title, all political parties, because, and this is at the basis of her critique, all political parties, in her mind, are detrimental to thinking. They get in the way of an individual using their reason to interpret their experience. And why is that? Because she argues very forcefully that regardless of the party, whether it's on the left, right, center, middle, mid-center, mid-right, whatever, there is a structure. There is an encompassing structure. There's repeated structural formation that ends up obscuring the truth and obscuring the individual's relationship to truth. And we kept on, even though she uses the word propaganda and she never uses the word ideology, we thought there was a way in which we kept on using the word ideology because it seemed like she was anticipating Althusser and even more contemporary treatments of ideology. So we thought we'd go to the classic texts on ideology, and we start, and I think this is Louis Althusser's 1970 essay is one of these classic texts. And I want you to comment or see if
I think
you have anything to add, but I think we're ready to go back in our explication of the text.
Not to add, but just to clarify, Weil talks about political parties, but in the essay, it's clear that she's not talking just about political parties. What she's really talking about is any sort of human-centered, as opposed to being centered on the divine, human-centered
Mhm.
organization that,
Mhm.
espouses a certain perspective or view or behavior. And she calls that propaganda. And I think that
Mhm.
the connection to Althusser for us, at least for me, but I think us, was pretty simple. What she calls political parties, Althusser calls state apparatuses. What she calls propaganda, Althusser calls ideology. And they're not one for one terms, but
Mhm.
I feel
Mhm.
like the connection is close enough that the two provide sort of an interesting extension of each other. So, um, I think that
Hence,
this,
we talked about these two texts together. Yeah.
right, right. And I think that what's fascinating about this is that, if things break a certain way this evening, Barry, in talking about how exactly Althusser is able to write this, just like we were able to insert Althusser as an extension of Vey, we might be able to
Mhm.
circle back and use Vey to explain Althusser. And that would be
Wow.
the
Wow.
kind of symmetry that really, really floats my boat.
That we pray for
And I want, I
fervently.
want, I want to be clear.
Critical
This
media
at this
studies.
point, right, as you're listening to this, you're like, wow, they do pretty in-depth pre-production. We have done no pre-production. This is really
Oh no, that's
this.
not
Well,
fair, Michael.
this
We had
no,
a
not no,
pregame
but
show. We had a pregame meeting.
I don't know, Barry. This feels a whole lot like optimism on my part. So, anyways, that's how I see this. The connection
Yeah.
is that they're using slightly different terms to discuss very similar social phenomena. And yeah, that's it.
Well, I think we can just go directly to the text. But before we do that, let's see, Michael, work with me here. Let's see if we can sort of do a very quick review. Now, what we're going to try to do in this episode is talk about some thorny parts or kind of complex parts that are in the final half of the essay, where, I mean, we're going to get into the weeds, but they're very interesting weeds. But let's see, help me here, please, and see if we can sort of rehearse. In fact, I'm going to frame this as a question, and I'm going to help you answer the question as well. So, Dr. Rapici, you're in a classroom. You have to talk about his opening gambit in a couple words. What do you think? Well, okay, I'm not going to say opening gambit.
Okay.
What do you think are two crucial terms from the first part of the essay? And I'll help you out if you have any problems, but I bet you're going to get it. What are two crucial terms that he introduces to the notion of ideology that are kind of game changers? Two
Well,
big things.
I don't. This feels
Hint,
like
hint.
hint.
There's the title might be
Yes.
part of it.
So I think it
Okay.
probably is. Right. So my answer for you, Barry, is that we're talking about the ideological state apparatuses
Yes, we
and
are.
the repressive state
Yes, I
apparatuses.
think we are.
Right. And
That
I
is
think
wonderful.
that I don't know how
I think
like
that's a correct answer.
okay, good. That's what I'm rolling with. And I'm gonna
Okay, and so let's try. I'll take ISAs. No, 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 no. I'm going to give you the maybe easy thing. I think it's going to be the easy
this
thing.
feels frightening
You
to
tell
me.
me
Let
what
me
an RSA is, and I'll do an ideological state. This is our little Jeopardy.
well, I
I'm
think
just
well,
trying
okay,
to do a
so
quick
if
précis, and
this
the
is
Jeopardy will do it.
so the idea behind the ISA and the RSA, I think it's important.
The Jeopardy intro for critical media
Well, I
studies.
think it's important first of all to ground this in its sort of Marxist roots, right? That the idea here is that the
All right,
ISAs
let's
and
do
the
it.
RSAs
Let's do it.
function as a means of ensuring the reproduction or the replication of the means of production, right? Like we have to continue to have people show up to work.
Indeed,
We
indeed.
have to continue to have people do their jobs.
Right.
And it is not enough to just tell people, hey, go do your job. Like we need to instill, there needs to be a mechanism in place that encourages people to do this on their own. So that's
And I'm just going to break in. You're on it. I want you to keep going. I just want to, since you did a shout out to the Marxist roots of this, what you just articulated is kind of fundamental to Marxist theory that the structure of a society is going to be the economic structure. So
right.
maintaining, reproducing the economic structure is going to be job one,
Mhm.
according to the Marxists.
But it's also
So
the social structure around the
indeed,
economic structure. So
indeed.
He identifies the ideological state apparatus and the repressive state apparatus. And
Okay.
the ideological state apparatus, so the ISAs, these are the institutions which essentially show us and teach us how to be
Indeed.
good little worker bees. And this is the
Good
family,
citizens.
this
And
is the school, this is the church, right? And the idea is that someone models good behavior for us. We see how to be, right? Like this is what a good student does, this is what a bad student does. This is what a good child does, this is what a disobedient child does. And so we are sort of indoctrinated via ideology, right? This is that teaches us how to be. And when we do well, we're good, and we are passed along from one institution to the next, which calls, we learn how to behave as proper subjects in these institutions.
key word you just used, behave. We
Yes,
learn how to behave and do the proper thing.
good. The RSAs come into play when we do a bad job of behaving appropriately. So,
Or when we do a concerted effort at misbehavior, maybe when we make concerted attempts to misbehave, we're just going to not behave in the proper way
should we
and
choose that?
maybe
Yes.
encourage other people. Yeah.
Right. So the RSAs function essentially to establish and maintain the status quo. And the RSAs for him are essentially the army, the police, right? Any sort of, we actually had a discussion about this in the
Primarily
last one
things
about
about force. Yeah.
about
Yeah.
where the law came in to be with this. I think we took a nice little detour into the legal system. But to stay focused, the RSA is a type of state apparatus that has the ability and the power to physically correct any sort of behavior,
It uses force.
intentional or otherwise,
Yeah.
that disrupts
Yeah.
the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah.
How'd I
Deploys
do?
force. Oh, you did perfect. You did 100. And I just wanted to have a little bit, and you did wonderfully there, Dr. Rapici. I'm just going to iterate something, and then we're going to go right into the text because I just wanted to have one little review
By the way, we just had our
segment
ideological,
so we can.
we just had our little ideological moment there. I'm asking if I behaved appropriately and well, or if,
Oh wow! And
it's
I'm going to use this to the point in that working with your example. I am the ISA because I didn't force you to be circumspect. Basically, my function I function like an institution
yep.
uh, to encourage you. Well, this is what exactly is going on in this situation if it's not coercion? That's really the interesting question we're going to be discussing when we discuss this new portion
Mm-hmm.
or the second half. It's like, okay, it's not force, it's not an RSA. ISAs work by ensuring conformity. We know that we are acting in line with the lessons taught to us by the institutional ISA when we do certain practices, and we do it without being told to or forced to or compelled to. So I think, interestingly enough, so first off, I think this distinction, I'll say this, I think I'm speaking for you, this Michael, before we go to the passage. I think this is kind of a game changer. This distinction between ISAs, uh, the claim that pretty much every institution in a capitalist society ends up sort of reproducing and suturing the subject into the proper behavior, into assuming the proper role within society, and making that distinction between the ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatuses that work by force. That's kind of game changer. And the other game changer, and that's going to get into what we're going to look at now, is the question of the status of. There's a mysterious statement that Althusser makes at the very beginning, and he continues to play and expand on this idea in the second half. And this is the idea that paradoxically, ideology isn't just a matter of having bad ideas. this might be another place where I'm not going to go on this too long, but this might be another place where Althusser's text bears a curious resemblance to Simone
Simone.
Weil. Yeah, that uh, Weil doesn't care whether or not the party is of the left or of the right or of the center, as we said. There's something about the structure of the party members' behavior that ends up being that ends up deforming the individual. Likewise, Althusser feels that it's not a matter of good belief. Well, rather, let me go back with they. It's participating in the party that messes you up.
Purvey, yes.
Yeah, for Vey, that's what messes you up. It's not you have the wrong belief if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You have a wrong belief. Fix the belief, join a different party, all will be well.
No,
That's not what they is saying.
no.
It is your participation. It is what you do as a party member, whatever that party is. That's what's messing you up. That's very Althusser. Because one of the curious things that he says to and returns to, says at the beginning and returns to, is that one thing in order to truly understand what's going on in ideology, you have to realize that it's not a matter of having bad ideas or good ideas. That ISAs work by ensuring that you do the right thing. So for him, he says at one point in the passage we talked about in the section we talked about last time on this fine podcast, he says, "In my theory of ideology, ideas no longer matter. I'm talking about practices and the mysterious way in which these practices enfold us, envelope us, ensure that we behave correctly without the use of force or restraint or visible force and restraint. It's the burden of the whole essay, but it's certainly what he's going to try to explain and in the latter half of the essay. And in doing so, I think he gets into some thorny, complicated writing and theorizing. But never fear, dear listener of Critical Media Studies podcast, never fear, because what we're going to do for the remaining bit of this episode is this: we've identified some of these thorny but important bits, where he kind of returns to, okay, after explaining the difference between ISAs and RSAs, he kind of Althusser returns to and expands on and draws further consequences from his theory of ideology. And like I said, the argument takes some interesting twists and turns. And we are going to travel the Althusserian labyrinth together. And we're going to see if we can find our way through we're going to pull on the Ariadne thread so we can get through the labyrinth of this essay. So are you ready, Dr. Rapici? I know you are.
Indeed, sir.
I know you are. I know you are. So let's go. Let's go. In every case, so I'm looking at a PDF. I think we talked about this. We're using the Ben Brewster translation from Lenin Philosophy, originally published in 1970. So it's page 35 in the PDF we're using if you're following at home. So I will read up from page 35 and then also go very quickly, Michael, to a passage on 37. In every case, the ideology of ideology thus recognizes, despite its imaginary distortion, that the ideas of a human subject exist in his actions or ought to exist in his actions. And if that is not the case, it lends him other ideas corresponding to the actions that he does perform. This ideology talks of actions. I shall talk of actions inserted into practices. And then very quickly moving to 37. On the way, 36, he says, disappeared in my theory of ideology. the term ideas, uh, what appears, what he wants to substitute for this terms, practices, rituals. And I should also read the midsection here. What survives in the old theory, from the old theory and old conceptions of ideology, is the idea of consciousness, belief, actions, and of course, the notion of a subject. But the subject is literally subjected to ideology. Let's now jump to page 40, and I'm going to read a passage, and Dr. Rapici is going to help me sort of work through this passage here. As a first formulation, I shall say, Althusser writes, all ideology hails or interpellates concrete individuals as concrete subjects. This is a proposition which entails that we distinguish a moment between concrete individuals on the one hand and concrete subjects on the other. I will continue. I shall then suggest that ideology acts or functions in such a way that it recruits subjects among the individuals or transforms, he has that in quotes, the individuals into subjects by the very precise operation which I have called interpellation or hailing, and which could be imagined, can be imagined along the lines of the most commonplace everyday police or other kind of hailing. Hey, you there. And assuming that the halted individual turns around, Althusser goes on to say, as soon by this mere 180-degree physical conversion, the turn of the individual, he becomes a subject. Why? Because he has recognized that the hail was really addressed to him, and it was really him who was hailed. Let me read one more thing, and then I'll stop talking. This
Sure.
is on page 41. That is why those who are in ideology believe themselves by definition outside ideology. One of the effects of ideology is the practical denegation of the ideological character of ideology by ideology. Ideology never says, I am ideological. Well, maybe I should have waited to read that passage until after your gloss. I'll leave you to decide on that if you wish.
Well, I think where do we want to discuss the way that
Well,
ideology functions?
why don't we do let's work through the police example and tell
Okay.
me, let's see if we can figure out for ourselves what's going on with the police example. And then maybe that will help us answer the question, the knotted question about why is it that ideology doesn't, that one of the effects of ideology is you don't think you're being ideological at all.
Well, okay, so I think maybe let's actually start there and work backwards for a second. Okay.
Yeah, I
I
think we
think
could.
the
Okay.
reason that Althusser is clear that everything and everyone is interpolated. That it's you're not outside of ideology. So why is it that we don't think of ourselves as ideological, despite the fact that we are ideological? And I think this is um, it's because it's all we know. The David Foster Wallace gave the commencement speech called "What is Water," and he talks the joke about how the fish are two young fish are swimming along, and the older fish comes up on them and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the fish looks like, "What is water?" Right? That I know that through his commencement speech. But the idea is that it's all we know. And so when it is the sum total of everything you know, you don't have the perspective to see yourself as outside of it because there is no outside of your experience. That is all you know. So the police exercise, the police example is an interesting one, right? The idea is that you're out down the street and someone counts, "Hey, you there." And every single time the subject turns, they recognize that they have been hailed, that this was a call for you. And so what I always like the way this was explained, this is the very famous thing about this. Remember the first time I read this, it was like, well, how is it possible? Fine, that works, but how is this ideology for all the other people who are not the intended subjects? Right. And this gets us to the how can you be outside of it? And I think that the way this was explained to me is that when you and I are walking down the street, Barry, and a police officer says, "Hey, you there," to you, because you have done something that requires them to address you. You turn, you have been
Hmm.
hailed. This is interpellation. You recognize yourself as the subject. I'm
Hmm.
walking next to you. They're not talking to me. I hear, "Hey,
Hmm.
you there," and I turn as well, but I'm not the subject. This is still
Hmm.
the ISA functioning properly because I recognize the call and the context and turn and, as an observer, am a correct participant in the ISA, right? So I'm going to turn and see, oh, wow, okay, hey, Barry, they're talking to you, as will everyone else. So this functions in the recognition of what appropriate behavior would be is the correct action according to the ideological state apparatus. We are all participating in it appropriately by our recognition. And as the intended subject of the
Hmm.
hail, we function as we should. As participants who turn and observe and see what's happening and make way for the police or do whatever it is that we're supposed to do in that moment, we are equally participatory.
Hmm. Hmm. I'll just add one or two things to that. I think that explains the dynamic nicely, but this seems to be like corollaries of what you described. Um, First off, maybe it's an even better example. If the policeman is talking to me and not to Dr. Rapici, but Dr. Rapici still looks in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that ISA is working pretty well
Absolutely.
because you know and for Althusser, what's crucial about ideology is what we do rather than what we believe. And then also, so the practice, he says, he iterates several times. We we participate in ideology through our um, natural consent to its calls.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he designates as the subjectification process. So that's an important part of this process. That answer to the call is reflexive. It's something you do by reflex without thinking about it. That's more proof that it's closer, more closely resembles a practice, a ritual act.
Mm-hmm.
A ritual practice might be even the best way of thinking about ideology from Althusser's point of view, because with rituals, you literally participate in it, and you don't always, you're asked to be mindful as you participate in the ritual. But as long as you do it outwardly and your behavior and your body conforms to the pattern, you're kind of doing it all you have to do. Um, if there's a mental component of assent along with it, that's like, the cherry on top of the
But it's
sundae.
not
But
necessary. And I think the
but it's
easy,
not necessary.
no, and the easy
What's
explanation
important is the
is,
reflexive. Yeah,
yeah, when we're hailed, we don't stop to think, should I
we
turn
don't stop
around?
to think.
We
That's it.
turn
Right.
around.
I think that's basically what he means by all the iterations, his frequent assertions that it's not about ideas, it's about practices. This is a perfect example of that. And finally, maybe this is a gesture, and I think you're right. I think you already answered that the last passage in the quote that I read, this idea that ideology doesn't think, when you act within ideology, you don't think you're acting according to ideology. It just seems natural to you. Uh, I think it's a corollary of what we've been talking about, what you've been describing, because the thing is, you're doing it, and you're not necessarily you certainly don't have to think about it. The main thing is you're doing it. Maybe you're thinking about it. Maybe you're thinking when you respond to the policeman, you could be thinking, if you're a totally ideologized subject, you might be saying, wait a minute, the policeman might be talking to me. I love police. I want to make sure that I talk to this policeman because I believe in the work of the police. You could be a fully ideologized subject and you could be thinking all these things, but you don't have to.
I think
What matters is you answer the call.
you would have been fully interpolated whether you think that or not. I think that
That's the
what
point.
he's saying
That's
is
the point.
just the recognition that someone
Indeed.
has been hailed and you have turned. Thought
Indeed.
is, I don't think it's cherry on top. I don't think it's no cherry at all. I think it's irrelevant for him. It's,
Mhm.
do
Okay.
we behave as we should? And every single ISA functions the same way. It's not just the police. We understand and behave appropriately, or else the RSA arm of the state apparatus comes in. But it's not, I don't think it's a thoughtful process. Once we've been indoctrinized, once we've learned what that behavior is, there's no thought. It's just, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Well, I think I agree. I think we're ready for the culminating moment. The moment, uh, maybe the scariest moment in the essay, where he addresses the question of, well, if you're so smart, Professor Althusser, and ideology really has no outside, how did you write this essay? So he tries to explain his subject position as a writer in two passages that I'm about to read, unless you want me to
I
do
well,
something else.
no, no. I think that I want to finish the last line. I don't know if this is what you're going to say, but we say
Sure,
it is
sure,
necessary to be
sure.
outside ideology. Well, so you would say those who are in ideology believe themselves by definition outside of ideology.
Mm-hmm.
One of the
Mm-hmm.
effects of ideology is the practical designation of the ideological character of ideology by ideology. Ideology never says I am ideological. We don't think, we just behave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it finishes though. It is necessary to be outside ideology, i.e., in scientific knowledge, to be able to say, I am in ideology, quite exceptional case, or the general case, I was in ideology. As is well known, the accusation of being in ideology only applies to others, never to oneself, which amounts to saying that ideology has no outside for itself, but at the same time, that it is nothing but the outside for science and reality.
Okay, do
That,
you want to comment on that passage? Do you want to
well,
comment on that passage? I'm going to, or do you want me to read the next two
no, I
passages
think
and
it
we'll
was.
return?
I think it was necessary to first to get this out right. This
Yeah.
idea that
Mm-hmm.
ideology is all
Mm-hmm.
encompassing, right? That the state apparatuses shape
There's no
all
outside.
that
Yeah.
shapes all
Yeah.
behavior. The only exception to this is that it's all outside. So this is the exception for science and reality. So he makes that
Mm-hmm.
distinction clearly, and I think we're going to pick at that now.
Okay. And so just two paragraphs down from where we were on page 41. Thus, ideology hails or interpolates individuals as subjects. He's given us many examples of that. As ideology is eternal, that's an odd sentence, but that's an odd statement. But I think that's a way of I think what he means by eternal is timeless. And I think that this is merely another way of saying what he's been saying about ideology is that it's it's the element in which we live and breathe and move, and it's not something that we can get outside of.
Is
It's
it
an eternal thing, and we're merely
is
temporal
is
beings.
constant an equivalent? Is constant a synonym for eternal here?
Could be, could
Okay,
be,
okay.
could be, could be. I find it curious. I when I
It's
just
a
read it
tough
now,
word.
I it's a tough word. I wonder this would be a place where I kind of would love to pick apart the French here because I wonder what
It was
French word
originally
he
used.
uses. But at any rate, yeah, yeah. But at any rate, but it's but I think he means by eternal. By eternal, I think he means something like it's a constant.
Hmm.
In a sense, it's outside of history, but we're not outside of history, so that means we're in it. you
Right.
know.
Well, I think I don't want to drag this out, but we're looking at the state apparatuses. These have been sort of pillars and hallmarks of civilization back to
Right.
clans.
A
And
long
so I
time.
think what he's saying here is that the ideology, which is a function of the apparatus, has always been a part of civilized existence
And
and will continue
moreover,
to be.
and moreover, this he bears down on this idea that there is no outside of ideology in all these paragraphs. So you're right. He does. He does sort of sense that this is a kind of almost eternally functioning uh, aspect of state life or citizen life,
Mm-hmm.
of being a citizen in whatever political domain one finds oneself. And then he goes hard, he goes deep. Individuals are always. I'll pick up that long sentence. As ideology is internal, I must now suppress the temporal form in which I have presented the functioning of ideology. Ideology has always already interpolated individuals as subjects, which amounts to making it clear that individuals are always already. So there is no time you're before, no time before your ideologization, no time before ideology, no time after it. You are always already interpolated by ideology as subjects, which necessarily leads us to one last proposition. Individuals are always already subjects. This must have something to do with the eternal quality that he's speaking of.
Well, if you think about it, when you are before you're born, right? The minute mom is pregnant with you, you are a soon to be part of a family. The family is the first state apparatus to which we are subjected. So
So that's it.
you are a part of a family before you are born. And I think
That's
that's what
it.
he's talking about here. Yeah.
Pre-existing. And
Yes.
I think this pre-existing structure is kind of what he means by eternality
Hmm.
too. Hence, individuals are abstract with respect to the subjects which they always already are. This proposition might seem paradoxical, he admits, but that an individual is always already a subject, even before he is born, as Dr. Rapici noted, is nevertheless the plain reality, accessible to everyone and not a paradox at all. Freud shows that individuals are always abstract with respect to the subjects that they always already are. Simply by noting the ideological, this is basically, Michael, what you just said,
Hmm.
simply by noting the ideological ritual that surrounds the expectation of a birth. And Althusser passed on before the gender reveal. But I mean, if that isn't an ideological apparatus, well, what is,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You know, the rituals of birth, we invented another one,
Hmm.
but it seems to sort of reinforce what he was saying about
Absolutely. That's
birth
interesting.
being kind of ideological ritual. Okay, so I think we're ready actually for our concluding question,
Okay.
and I'm going to phrase it, um, and I can go first if you want,
Let's
or
see.
you can
Let me
go
hear the
first.
question first.
Here's the question. I'm going to allow you. I'm going to allow you an out though,
yeah. Yeah. I
because I'm
appreciate
being a
it.
little bit unfair. Because I do want to phrase the question as a comparison
Okay.
as we draw to a close. So, Dr. Rapici, this is the big Jeopardy question, although it will not be in the form
I have a question.
in proper, yeah, and it will be more rambling and less concise than the or bigger in range than the Jeopardy question, but it will be a Jeopardy like question, and it's going to be comparative. So my question for you, and I will try to give an answer as well, of course, is there an outside to ideology according to Althusser? And then the follow up question or the related question that will end this episode and end. Goodness, do we do 4 episodes? 4 episodes on Vey and is this
Three,
the end of
I
number
think.
four?
I think we
Three?
did Vey in one.
We did a Vey and one? Okay. Well, then, all right. So this is going to be bringing the trilogy to a close. So this is a kind of Star Warsy moment. This is very important.
Here we go.
Is there an outside to propaganda for Vey? And is there an outside to ideology for Althusser, and then I will take as fair comments any way you want to go. Like if you want to say, I, yes,
Okay.
there
Okay. No, I
is.
got it. I got
You
it.
got it. You got it. Okay, I'm
So,
not going to give more instructions.
so I just want to make sure I got these right. Is there an outside of LD ideology for Althusser? I'm going to
Yes.
say he thinks so. I'll come back to that in a second.
Okay.
And is there an outside to propaganda for Vey? Yes, she thinks so. Now those are such terrible answers. So
No, no, I think
well
those are correct. I feel those are correct answers. I
so
just want an elaboration of
yeah,
them.
okay, and that's fair. I think I should have the right to wander around the woods for a second as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
please.
so Althusser is very clear about this, right? He says that science and reality are always outside of ideology.
Indeed.
Ideology, for Althusser, creates functions via interpellation, where we become subjects. So the way outside of ideology, for Althusser, is to find a place that does not have a subject. He identifies science and nature. These are subjectless areas. The idea is that they are purely objective. Right. So
Mhm.
Althusser believes that mathematics, for example, or physics, right?
Facts. Facts.
This is simple
Facts.
statements of
Yes.
facts
Mhm.
that we can apprehend, we can engage, but they exist outside of human subjectivity.
Indeed. Right. Facts equal reality equal science, i.e., or rather equals
So,
a non-human dimension of yeah.
that works so long as you are able to remove the state apparatus that administers science, i.e., the university.
Well,
And so
yeah.
I will leave that to
Yes. Yeah.
you to unpack in a moment. So I think
Yeah.
just to say this, it's a tricky question because we're talking about this as a really, and maybe I get in trouble here, maybe I don't. I don't know. Um, these objective fields that he's finding, these are like tools for human reasoning that somehow exist
Mhm.
objectively, and I think that's an interesting idea. For Vey, outside of propaganda is very simple, right? For what she calls political parties, which are close cousins to Althusser's state apparatuses, right? Function, they create propaganda because they are driven by human intention. Again, good, bad, left, right, up, down does not matter. It
Doesn't
is the
matter. Yeah.
fact that it's driven
Right.
by human intention. So, her answer to getting outside of propaganda is attention, is to focus on the divine. So, for Vey, you need the divine to step outside of propaganda. Incredibly difficult, happens in very short bursts. So if you look at something like mathematics or physics as eternal, right, then we can say that Althusser got the better, you know, better deal. He has a longer, more stable sense of something outside of ideology. They exist outside of propaganda intermittently. But the difference between the two, it's interesting, is
Mhm.
that um, we, I think, as if we look at Vey's lens, we
Mhm.
still become active participants in that extra propaganda moment. Whereas for Althusser, to step outside of ideology will always be separate from us because we as humans are subjects. We
Subject
are,
to it.
and
Right.
so
Right.
so
That's a great point.
what is not ideological is necessarily separate from us. Whereas for Vey,
That's a great point.
communing with the divine is outside of propaganda. So we actually get to be a part of that moment for Vey.
That's a great point when you say that Althusser's moment of rupture with ideology, or the moment
Yeah.
where science enters, is also weirdly enough the moment where the human leaves behind the human,
Yes. 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 Yes.
which is
Exactly.
very tricky. So in a way,
That's well said.
but well, thank you. But you know what? As you were talking, I saw, and I'll close with this. Um, as you were talking, I think I see two strange resemblances
Hmm.
between Weil and Althusser that I didn't think of until you gave us your insights, Michael. So let me see if I can. I'll end by sort of coming to. I'm going to make two claims about Simone Weil and what she might have in common with Althusser. And it's kind of inspired by what you said about Althusser's uh, belief in science as the non-human truth. Now, they the big difference between Althusser and Weil obviously is a difference between theism and atheism, but there is a and you correctly described Weil as part of what she's talking for, a part of what she speaks of, and part of what she offers as a corrective or as a pathway to truth is a kind of emptying out of the self that occurs, according to her, in the act of attention that allows for truth, God, whatever, to enter in. But, okay, so the idea that the divine can enter in that vacancy, that in that mystical evacuation of the self. That's not Althusser, obviously. But there is one way in which it is, because Weil was also fond of mathematics and science. And in her classic essay on attention, one of the examples she gives of the aha moment is when the individual, and she sort of says, this is kind of equivalent to the entering of the divine in the human mind, is when the student loses themselves in the attempt to get the right answer to a mathematical question.
That's
And
right.
that is the truth. So in a
That's right.
way, they do kind of both gesture toward, and I'm building this on what you said, the non-human truth. In a way, they do kind of uh,
Well, you
the
know what's
non-human truth
interesting?
is not just Vay's divine. It's not just the divine, right? The human is participating in that when they align themselves or get them. They prepare their spirit to solve the
So let me
mathematical
ask you a
formula.
question, just a quick extension of this, because I think this is interesting, right? The truth for Vey is inherent in her thesis, right? That anything that takes us away from the divine is going to be propaganda.
Indeed,
So, in maybe a cheap way of paraphrasing that is that the human is flawed, right?
sure.
Okay, so for
Does she
Althusser,
use a word? What is she? I think there was a word she uses. Does she talk about interest or selfish, or she uses a derogatory word for human nature that basically stands for the human element in
well,
politics?
suffice to say that anything that is not
Yeah,
focused on the divine
yeah, yeah.
is
Self-interested. Yeah,
yes, which gets us to propaganda. For
indeed,
Althusser, it's interesting because all of the things which are focused in the social are a part of the ISAs. The only thing
indeed,
that gets us outside of that. So is Althusser essentially like is the ISA? I guess you wouldn't say it's flawed because it doesn't matter whether it's left, right, up, down, blue or green, right? But it's restrictive or it's restrictive in some fashion, even if it's not repressive outright, right? They are still shaping behavior. Is that also taking us away from the divine, which for him would be then science or
science. Right,
reality, right?
right.
What he calls reality, but I guess just an objective reality.
Well, I think well, here's my
Like, are they
cagey
closer
answer.
than you'd realize at first blush?
I do feel that. I do feel that. I think that, but to answer your specific question, I think because he has an agenda, Althusser has an agenda to show how, and his agenda in this essay, as we said repeatedly in this episode, his main purpose is to get us to think about ideology in a new way. So we're not just saying, man, that's a bad set of ideas. I don't like the school
No,
ISA because it tells me the wrong thing.
no,
And
no.
I'm going to learn the right thing and I'm going to make it better. He wants to go against that. But nonetheless, to answer your question, I do feel that there implicitly in this, there's this idea that, say, the school essay or the essay, the school ISA, the media ISA has it wrong.
Mhm.
It's wrong. It's false. It's
Well, it's
false.
taking us away from the natural
Yes.
state
Yes. Yes.
and shaping us in a way that is, if it's not natural, then it's unnatural in some form.
Right. Right.
Um, but again, it's interesting because it's not about thought, it's about behavior, which corresponds with that. But he's not advocating for anything. He's just saying this is how it works. So I think by
Indeed.
avoiding the value call, or the value
Yeah.
judgment, that
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. Oh, good job, Barry.
I was just sort of building on your insight, Dr. Rapici. So this is a good place for us to because we have a moment of amity, and that's so rare in our culture right now. Let's end while
Barry,
let's end while we can. Let's
thank you,
stop
thank you.
overhead.
Yes. All right. Have a wonderful night, Barry. We will do this again soon, sir. Take care.
All right, take care.